I've been advised I need to create an introduction to these videos. I'm Bronzy, I'm a civil engineer and I'm rather fond of construction. You see, the industry is exhilarating, it's rewarding. All your effort has a tangible output. Everything you do you can see, you can feel. That being said, it is incredibly stressful. You work long hours in the heat, long hours in the rain, and oftentimes you are injured. And because of that, it started to take a toll on my hairline. That's why I'll be booking some flights to Turkey. And while I am in Turkey, I'll be checking out one of the greatest religious monuments ever made. What was once a cathedral became a mosque, then became a museum, and more recently became a mosque once again. I'm talking about the Hagia Sophia, the history these walls have seen, and we'll be exploring all of it. The site of this project is on the eastern Bosporus of Istanbul, previously known as Constantinople in Turkey. Before we dig into how it was all built, we need to understand the life throughout the years. In 360 AD, the OG Hagia Sophia, or known at the time as the Magna Ecclesia, was built. In 415, the church was rebuilt after being destroyed. In 537 AD, we see the Hagia Sophia we all know it as. In 558, the dome on top had collapsed, and this was rebuilt. In 1453 AD, the Hagia Sophia was now declared a mosque. In 1935, the Hagia Sophia became a museum. In 2016, it had reverted back to a mosque. Now that we have a bit of an overview of her history, we can now do a deep dive. Originally built as the Magna Ecclesia, translating to Great Church, by Emperor Constantius, this was burnt down in 404 AD. This made way for it to be rebuilt by Emperor Theodosius II, for again to be burnt down once again in 532 AD. Now you see, in 532 AD to 537 AD, the Hagia Sophia we typically know was built. Byzantine Emperor Justinian the Great commissioned its construction. Her name translates to Holy Divine Wisdom. So Justinian had Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus to design the structure. This was a grand cathedral, I mean one of a kind, and it stood tall for 1,000 years. It was a major cultural, political and religious site. Its scope was remarkable while also being breathtaking and aesthetic. Keep in mind, this was the largest cathedral in the world. Why does the Hagia Sophia look the way it does? Well, that's because a lot of it is rooted in Byzantine architecture. You see, this type of aesthetic is rooted in grand mosaics, domes and detailed columns. Byzantine architecture carries a lot of Roman DNA. You see, Byzantine was the eastern part of the Roman Empire. When the western side had collapsed, the Eastern Roman Empire became what we know as Byzantium. So over time, its architectural style had evolved into what we know it as. Other notable examples of Byzantine architecture include the Basilica Sistine, Our Lady of Sednea Monastery, and the Basilica of San Vitale. We believe it took 10,000 workers to construct the Hagia Sophia, and actually, according to the Patricia, which is it's sort of like a story about the capital of Byzantium, and now I'm quoting here, there were 100 master craftsmen, and each of them had 100 men, so that altogether there were 10,000. 50 masters with their crews were building the right hand side, and the other 50 were likewise building the left hand side, so that the work would proceed quickly in competition and haste. The Hagia Sophia was primarily built from bricks, mortar and the occasional use of marble. However, Justinian wanted these materials sourced from all corners of the Byzantine Empire. For instance, of the 140 columns in the Hagia Sophia, 8 porphyry columns came from Egypt, and another 8 from the Artemis Temple in Ephesus. The bricks used were mainly made from clay, with the mortar being a composition of sand, lime, and water. The marble used was for the interior decoration, namely the floor and the ceiling. This came from Anatolia, which is now known as present-day Turkey. Wood was used for the roofing structures and doors. Okay, so we've established who built it, why it was built, what was used to build it, but outside of its aesthetic, what makes the engineering of the Hagia Sophia so goddamn interesting? Well, the goal was this: How do you build a dome on a square base while maintaining a floating look to it? Pendentives was the answer. Picture 4 columns on each corner, and then an arch between each column. Now have these arches filled with masonry. That right there is a pendentive. It is an architectural element that allows a dome to be placed on a square base. The pendentives receive the weight of the dome, transferring it to the columns underneath. Aesthetically, it allows a seamless transition from a square box to a dome. Funny fact about the Hagia Sophia dome, it actually collapsed and was rebuilt smaller. And fun fact, the dome collapsing is akin to my life. I too have collapsed multiple times under pressure. That's not all. The dome had to look like it was floating. It can't just sit there. So they had 40 ribs with 40 windows installed at the dome's base. It gave this airiness, sort of like a hovering type of vibe. Outside of the dome, this monument also required additional support. This came in the form of buttresses. A buttress is a structure that takes the weight of whatever it's put against and then transfers this weight to the ground. The Hagia Sophia was altered once more when it became a mosque. The Sultan Mehmed II conquered Byzantine and had the Hagia Sophia converted to a mosque. The changes include the addition of structural supports, minarets, Sultan's Lodge, and a mausoleum. These changes were undertaken by architect Mehmet Sinan. Additionally, Islamic calligraphy was used to decorate over the Christian mosaics. What speaks to me about the Hagia Sophia is how it perfectly captures the evolution of culture. You see the original structure and then you notice the changes following Mehmet II conquering Byzantine. All of this speaks to the history of the country and the monument and the people. And well, there you have it. A brief, albeit interesting, exploration of the Hagia Sophia. Feel free to drop some suggestions on other construction projects we could explore. See you in the next one.